Recently, I've been doing a ton of different top 5 most forgotten Yu-Gi-Oh cards, talking about Synchro Monsters and Exceed Monsters and Hand Traps, but today I wanted to do a video not necessarily on cards that were forgotten, but just the top 10 best normal monsters in the game. Now, to lay some ground rules, there's actually a couple things that make my list different from some other top normal monster lists. The two main things is that I'm not talking about legacy cards, such as anything that's only notable because it's a classic card, or cards that were out a long time ago that never really haven't mattered in like a decade. So that takes off cards like Red Eyes and Dark Magician for like classic cards, and then it also takes off things like Mechanical Chaser that were pretty relevant when they were released because of solely their attack points. Just because there's so many old cards that are iconic or were like the highest attack of their time. They're not super important though to the competitive game as a whole because they just were good because they had attack points. The other thing I'm not going to go over is any Gemini or Pendulum monster. Now this was actually a really tough decision for me because I really wanted to put Neos Alias on this list, but I think sticking to normal monsters that have no effects whatsoever, even in the case of Alias, which while it didn't have a relevant effect, it made it really useful with like Gemini Spark and stuff, which is an advantage that not all these other normal monsters have. And then with the Pendulum monsters, it's pretty obvious because if you're a normal monster, the main point is that you're a card that doesn't have an effect, where the Pendulums all had effects. So there's no Cliffort Scout, no Metal Foes on this list, no Master Pendulum. And barring all that in mind, we're going to talk about 10 really important normal monsters over the course of the game's history, at least for the past decade or so. We're looking at 2007 forward, maybe even a little sooner than that, 2008 or so forward. And I think all these cards, well, I know all these cards had an impact on the meta game, which is really important for making this list. They had to be played in some meta deck or a variety of rogue decks and made an impact over the course of the past couple of years here. So anyway, let's jump right in with number 10. Gene Warped WARWOLF. Now, this card made not a huge impact when it was originally released. It was one of the biggest normal summonable monsters of its time. Chainsaw Insect obviously has 2400 attack, but it has a huge drawback of giving your opponent free cards. Gene Warped WARWOLF is really simple. It's just 2000 attack, doesn't really have any effect. Well, I guess it goes without saying, but it doesn't do anything besides have a lot of attack. However, this card popped up in the original variants of Fire Fist. Now, you guys might not remember, I don't know how long you've been playing, but when Fire Fist first came out, people played Rescue Rabbit with Gene Warped WARWOLF and Sabersaurus at some points, just because you could boost this thing with Tenki, and it could attack over basically any monster in the mirror match, and you could also just Rescue Rabbit into 2 Gene Warped WARWOLF to make the Tiger King guy in Fire Fist. So that was a pretty cool play, and it was actually competitively relevant for a month or so there, and it's pretty surprising for a level 4 monster to be used in that way, especially in such recent times. So yeah, that's why it makes a list, but it was only really relevant for those like 2 months or whatever, so it's not very high in the list. Number 9 is Dark Witch. Now, I really wanted to put Jax Knight on this position, but I have to acknowledge that Dark Witch does what Jax Knight did better. And basically, both these cards were played during a very specific time in Yu-Gi-Oh! When Monarchs with Brilliant Fusion were popular. And they were only played for one combo, and that one combo was that if you open Brilliant Fusion and Return of the Monarchs, you could do a whole bunch of nutty stuff by using Brilliant Fusion for Seraphonite, you sending Dark Witch or Jax Knight to the graveyard, and Gem Knight Lazuli, add back the Dark Witch or Jax Knight, activate Return of the Monarchs, tribute summon the Dark Witch, and then trigger Return of the Monarchs to search Ether, and then seeing you have now an extra summon because you used the first one on Seraphonite, or the first one with Seraphonite, you can now tribute the Dark Witch, which is a tribute summon monster, for the Ether. And it was just it was a really good play, made Brilliant Fusion a lot more powerful instead of just sending your little squires. And that play was really good. And I have to put Dark Witch on here, even though it's not a huge difference, because Dark Witch randomly had an application against Rivalry of Warlords, because Seraphonite and Dark Witch and Ether are all fairy monsters. Even though Jax Knight looked cooler because it was an ultimate rare, ultimately, no pun intended, Dark Witch ended up making the cut just because of that one very specific interaction with Rivalry of Warlords. Coming in at number 8 is Labradorite Dragon. I don't know how I always pronounce this card Labradorite, but I don't think it's how you're supposed to pronounce it. But this card is 0 attack, 6-star tuner, and there aren't a lot of high level tuners in the game. Usually they're lower leveled, but this card kind of made a big impact because it's so high leveled. So you can do a lot of stuff with this. The main decks that played this were Heretics. It was quite good in that deck. A lot of people made Ultimaya Zulkin with this card. That was probably the most common use for it. But you could do some other synchro shenanigans with it. It's a dark monster, so it's synergy with all the chaos cards. I played it in many of my variants of the Heretic Chaos Dragon decks that I played last year or 2 years ago, I suppose now. It just has a lot of synergy with everything that Heretics want to do. It's normal monsters, so you can send them a Dragon Shrine and send another monster. Just an all-around good card and probably one of the best normal monster tuners in the game. And yeah, it popped up in pretty much ever since it was released in Shadow Specters. It came up in just every variant of Heretics going forward, and I'm assuming that won't change anytime soon. Next, we have the original Blue Eyes White Dragon, possibly the only sort of classic card on this list. But the reason that it's on this list is because not only is it a classic, iconic card, but it's actually competitively relevant. Blue Eyes was the most powerful deck 2 years ago at Worlds. Well, it was like a year ago, but 2 World Championships ago, Blue Eyes was the most powerful deck there. And then it dominated the TCG meta for a while, actually, a couple months, up until pretty much... I don't know. I mean, it was good through Invasion Vengeance and then kind of fell off the map after that. But in the TCG, it was definitely one of the better decks. It just was really powerful. And especially at that time when Pot of Desires came out, not a lot of decks were very good. So the fact that Blue Eyes was like a big monster, had a lot of big monsters in the deck, had a lot of good spell cards, it was definitely an integral part of that top deck. And you couldn't replace it with anything because it's the OG Blue Eyes and had the most synergy with like every card in the deck. Next, we have FLAMVELL Guard. Now, this card, ironically, has never popped up in a FLAMVELL deck, to my knowledge, but it's been good in pretty much every variant of Dragon Rulers while they were in their heyday. So it was good in the original Dragon Rulers because it was a level 1 fire tuner that you could search out. It was good in the Ravine Rulers for the same reason. And then it was good later on in the Mythic Ruler deck when the Dragon Rulers were all limited, because you could send this with Dragon Shrine to put an extra dragon in your graveyard, and then also still you could search it as a level 1 tuner. And especially with Mythic Rulers, your tuner monsters were incredibly important because you had a lot less longevity with the Dragon Rulers themselves. And if a lot of people mention that they want Dragon Lords back, and I don't think they should come back. I think one of the big reasons is that you could search FLAMVELL Guard, summon it, and then make Omega, and then shuffle back the Blaster, and that'd just be ridiculous. But FLAMVELL Guard has had a ton of impact in almost every version of Dragon Lords over the time, and it's popped up once again in a lot of Heretic lists as well, for the same reason that Labradorite Dragon has, except that it's level 1 tuner, so you can tune it with like your level 6 Heretics to make Black Rose Dragon blow up the field. We're now halfway through the list here, and we have a card from way back in 2012, and that is Sabersaurus. I know I mentioned this when Gene Warped WARWOLF was mentioned, but Sabersaurus was a lot more dominant. Dino Rabbit was one of the most feared decks of its time. It was honestly just so powerful for so many months, even after Rabbit got hit, even after Tour Guide got hit. Sabersaurus was so hard to beat. It makes the list instead of Cabazals, as much as I love Cabazals. Sabersaurus was the one that you wanted to open because it had 200 more attack, and it could crash with Thunder King, and it could run over like anything back then except for Exceed monsters. It was just really common back in the day to use Rescue Rabbit to get the Cabazals out of the deck first because Sabersaurus was a better one to draw, which means that it actually makes the list. And it actually recently popped up in Dinosaurs, like an actual dinosaur deck, before Dragonic Diagram came out, because you could do some pretty cool shenanigans with Lost World. And when you had Lost World out and Sabersaurus, it was actually kind of tough for your opponent to deal with because it got the protection from Lost World, which is sort of a minor thing, but plenty of regional top 8 deck lists. And I don't think any YCS lists, but regional top 8 deck lists definitely played Sabersaurus as tech copies in a couple different variants. And in the OCG, a lot of people played Sabersaurus alongside the Megal Smasher because they have like triple Rescue Rabbit, and it's crazy over there. Coming in number 4, and maybe you guys would think that I would put this higher, we have Gemnite Garnet. No, this card I think has made it on 3 lists, possibly 4. Yeah, I think 4 top 5 or top 10 lists that I've made. And it's not number 1 this time. It's not the most useful normal monster, but it's really important, and I'll kind of reiterate real fast here why it's good. It's good because it's 1900 attack points. It's good because it's the best Gemnite design with Brilliant Fusion for Seraphinite. It's good because the 1900 attack points can attack over like a lot of things. I mean, we're talking Abyss Dweller, Skull Crobat Joker, just anything that's a normal summon pretty much. Garnet can run over, which makes it really good compared to Gemnite Tourmaline, which isn't as expensive. I mean, I don't think Garnet's very expensive either, but Tourmaline a lot of people use as like a budget option because they didn't want to pay $5 for a normal monster. But I can say that the 1600 attack versus the 1900 attack definitely makes a difference, and there's just no other card that can take Garnet's place. Gemnite Lazuli takes a close second, but it's only because of its effect. But drawing Gemnite Lazuli definitely sucks a lot more than drawing Gemnite Garnet, and anyone that's drew either of those cards would probably know that. Number 3 is a card that I've played a lot over the past year, and that is Skull Servant. So Skull Servants have been increasingly relevant as they get more support. Not only direct support like White Princess, but also White Prince. And then more importantly probably is that Cypher Lord Omega and Unizombie and Shiranui Solitaire all just inherently boost the strategy of Skull Servants and zombies in general. So Skull Servant is a staple 2 or 3 of in every single Skull Servant necklace. You need to send it with White Prince. You need to increase the attack of King of the Skull Servants, and you can't get around playing this normal monster, but it's not that bad. You can do some funny combos with it, I suppose. You're not going to be like attacking for game with Skull Servant, but in terms of the amount of all these cards on the list, I could probably say that recently Skull Servant's probably the most popular of all of them in terms of how many times it's been played, just because people have been really excited for Skull Servants, especially when Grasp was at 3. But even now, zombies in general are pretty good with Link Summoning, so I wouldn't be surprised people were going to Skull Servants in their casual tournaments. Anyway, coming in at number 2, we have GENEX Controller. Now, good old GENEX Controller, what a great card. So GENEX Undyne is the main reason that you're playing this card. It was used way back in the day to send frogs to the grave, which many of you might not even remember. But before Undyne was a meta-relevant card, it was used to send Treeborn Frog to the graveyard, which is kind of funny. But obviously, the main reason that you play GENEX Controller nowadays, or in the past, at this point, 4, almost 5 years, which is weird to think about, is Mermails. So before Mermails had Neptibus, GENEX Undyne was absolutely the way to go. And even after they got Neptibus, plenty of people played Undyne. It's just such a good power play to use Undyne and to send a water monster like Dragoons, and then add Controller to your hand. The Controller itself is pretty useful. 1400 attack isn't like Garnet levels, but it's definitely not like Takatomborg levels where it can't do anything. And it's also a dark monster, so people, especially in the first iteration of Mermails, would play Controllers and then Gores and Tragodia so that you could play Allure of Darkness. That's kind of neat. It's also a level 3 tuner monster, a very good tuner monster, because you can make Black Rose and just all sorts of stuff, really. There's been, I mean, Leo was really popular for making with Controller and Teus. That's a pretty common play. But Controller being a tuner and being dark and having the machine typing just makes it an all-around fantastic card for a deck like Mermails, and it's no surprise that it's popped up in like for years, basically. It's definitely been one of the most successful level 3 normal tuners, although that's a pretty specific window there. Anyway, coming in at number 1 is probably the major upset here. Maybe you wouldn't think about this being number 1, but we have Mystic Shine Ball. Now, before you get mad at me, let's just go over how competitively relevant Mystic Shine Ball has been. Obviously, it wasn't very good when it came out. I don't even know from a design standpoint why it was made. I guess to set up tribute summons and agents, because it came out long before like Synchros did. And no one played it back then, but boy, when Synchros came out and Agents got the structure deck with Master Hyperion and Earth and stuff, Venus and Shineball were just staples at 3 of them. You could use Earth and Venus to make Trishulas, that was really dumb. You could use Venus and Shineballs to do stuff with GENEX Satellite Birdman. There was just a whole bunch of dumb stuff with Synchros. Flash forward to when Exceed Monsters come out. Mystic Shineball was one of the absolute best ways to make Gachi Gachi Gentetsu, which you guys might not think is a great card, but back when it first came out in the starter deck, that card was just incredible. Probably by far the best Exceed monster back then. Utopia definitely was good, but I think Gachi Gentetsu was a lot easier to make, especially because agents were so powerful at that time. You could just Venus out a Gachi Gentetsu for like nothing, basically. I mean, just life points, no card advantage, and you still had the Venus, and you had the Shine Ball of Venus, that 2000 attack, pretty good opening play. Flash forward to Pendulums, they don't really do anything, but if you go all the way to modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, this card's popping up in World Chalice as a staple 3 of, once again, easy way to summon Link monsters, and it's just crazy how versatile Shine Ball has been. It's even popped up in, like, various Herald of Perfection decks for using with advanced ritual art. This card has seemingly endless possibilities, which is crazy because looking at this list, stat-wise, the only card that's worse than it is Skull Servant, and yet it's just so good, and that's why it has to make number one. It's just been the most relevant in the most number of formats for the most number of years. And anyway, that'll wrap up the list. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I'm sure I missed your favorite metal armored bug normal monster, but I don't know. That's all for today. If you have any suggestions for top 5 forgotten cards you want me to cover next, I know that wasn't this video, but I'm definitely doing one of those a couple days here. So if you have any suggestions for that, let me know, and I'll see you guys later.